Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I'm from South Jersey, near Woodbury. My friends and I from high school always used to go camping in the Pine Barrens a couple times during the summer. The spindly pines are always creepy, even in broad daylight. It always seems like something is hiding between them, and the white sand prevents anything else from growing, so the place feels totally deserted. One night we were the only ones at the campsite, and the deep blackness beyond the fire seemed endless. Two of my friends went off to find firewood, and came back an hour later saying there was something far off in the woods. All they could tell was that it was white, and was facing away from them. I didn't believe them. We went on making dinner. Pretty soon it was getting late. That's when my friends started talking about the witching hour, that there were strange things in the woods, and that it was their time. I don't know why he brought this up. I guess he was scared from before. We all dismissed what he said to compensate for the unsettling fear which had by now made its way into all of our subconscious. We ended up staying awake all night, in a circle with our backs to the fire, shaking with terror as we stared blindly and helplessly into the pitch darkness. We held axes, machetes, and knives to defend against the thing we had seen and heard stalking us for hours. It played with us. Just when we became convinced it was all in our heads, and maybe we could sleep, it would come back. Sometimes it was in the trees. Sometimes it was all around us all at once. I was the last to fall asleep, delirious and manic. I never go to Pine Barrens alone after that. This isn't a LARP.
I'll get this out the way pretty quickly, but I'm a Redditor and this is my first post on X. I apologize if I am not writing this properly, but I've only seen Greentext videos on YouTube. I know you probably hate me for this, but I hope you will read this regardless and maybe help me out. I am writing this to try and get some answers about something I saw when I was young. When I was young, I lived in northern New Jersey in a development not too far from the woods, in a place it was clear there had been previous settlement, old rock walls to mark boundaries, and a lone standing fireplace further back in the woods. Now, for some reason, for all the time I spent playing in the woods with my friends, I never really thought about the stone fireplace standing in the woods for no real reason. I had grown up with it and never really thought about it. It was about the height of a two-story house and was wide enough for a large fire. I can only assume that because the stone was more substantial than a wooden house, it was the only part of the house to survive. I'm not sure it has any relevance, but the legend surrounding the Jersey Devil mentions a chimney, and the encounter happened pretty close to it. When I was around 10, I remember I was chasing fireflies or some shit around my backyard and they took me into the woods, not very far. I would always stay within sight of the house at night. Now, the interesting thing that night is that the crickets that normally make a shitload of noise were quiet. This wasn't that uncommon, but while by itself it wasn't that important, I also noted that further in the woods there were no fireflies at all. Now, I had chased the few fireflies in the yard to the woods, and there were none when normally there would be at least a few more. It was when I was looking for the lights of fireflies in the twilight that I saw something that I wrote off later until very recently. What I saw deeper in the woods were two dull red eyes, and instantly I was paralyzed. It was far off, but seemed to look straight at me. Then came the smell. It was something that at the time I couldn't place, but a few weeks later we had a scrap bonfire and I would realize that the smell was of burning metal. After what seemed like an eternity, there was a twig snap in that direction and I bolted to the house. I didn't look back and I didn't sleep that night. From that night on, I never went outside at night without the crickets chirping. That it. No revelation, no murder, no future sightings, nothing. I know that this is pretty boring, but I still hope that you can help me. The thing is, at the time I knew of the legend of the New Jersey Devil, and for a time it scared the shit out of me. As I grew older, I wrote it off as me making things up. I like to think I'm logical, and so I just forgot about it thinking it must be some bad lighting or something. I hadn't thought about it for years, and a few years ago I moved out of the country. One night I was out drinking with a mate of mine when I thought I saw something in the woods on the way back. That's when I told him about what I had seen when I was young. Being drunk, I thought it would be a funny story of how stupid I was. We had a laugh about it till I mentioned the smell of burning metal. That was when he told me about Goatman and showed me one of the stories on here. That night I did not sleep. I simply shivered in my bed, not because of the cold but because I was drunk and terrified. Then I looked up Goatman for myself and started to think more and more about the night, and the more I thought about it the less I could ignore what I could not make sense of. I would write off the whole thing as a trick of the light and inconsistent memories of how quiet it was, but the smell. That smell was unique and I cannot forget it. I feel crazy talking about it. It makes me sound insane, but I know what I saw and smelt and heard. I can't think of how I would remember those three things if they didn't happen. The red eyes are consistent with other descriptions of the Jersey Devil, and the smell and the silence that fit with descriptions of Goatman. You can read more about the Jersey Devil yourself elsewhere, but the gist is that in southern New Jersey there was a man called Leeds, and he was a rival of Benjamin Franklin, and so started rumors about him, calling him the Leeds Devil, which is what people eventually started to call a monster which has had reported sightings since around 1820, with most of the reports coming after 1909. This monster has the head of a goat, horse, bat-like wings, stands upright on hooves, and has red eyes. I've included a picture of a sketch of the beast from 1909. Again, I'm sorry if this is shit writing or if it pisses you off, but I'm just interested in what you have to say. So my questions to you are: is the Jersey Devil just a wrongly identified goat man, or this something unique? If so, what about the wings and red eyes? Have you heard any other stories about the Jersey Devil? Me and a few buddies decided to go camping. Now a bit of background info on this shithole: it looks the same no matter where you go. So being the dumb asses we are, we went hiking around 8 p.m. There are a few folk tales about glowing lights off the trails. Those are completely true. We were all a bit drunk, and decided to follow the pretty glowing lights. We followed them for a good half-mile off the trail. It led us to a burnt tree with a noose hanging off it. It took us 6 hours to find our way back to camp. The worst part was when we got to our tents, someone decided to fucking cut them up. We drove out that night. Now because we're fucking dumb, we decided it would be great to go back. Fun times for all and whatnot. So after getting there we decided on a day hike, so no fucking lights led us to some lynch spot. So we're gone for an hour tops before we get hungry, decide to grill and whatnot on an open fire. We get back to camp and lo and fucking behold, the tents are torn again. This time we're sober and pissed. We check for tracks around the campsite, just ours. So we decide fuck this, we're gonna catch this son of a bitch. We get in the car and drive off looking. So a bit more background info on the Pine Barrens: there are no deer. It's sand and pine, so you get some small mammals. So imagine our fucking surprise when we spy off to the side of the trail what looks like a fucking horse. Now if you know the most common myth from that area, you're thinking it's the Jersey Devil. You would be correct. Fucking horse monster decides to charge the car. We drive the fuck out of there. We're planning the third adventure down there. The theory is it's too fucking cold for anything to be down there. So I'm hoping my new tent won't be ripped to shreds this time.
Born and raised in Atlantic County. There's weird shit in the woods. Trails that will abruptly end out of nowhere, railroad tracks in the woods, abandoned stone structures, and cars that are so far out, they have no business being there. There's a lot of wildlife out there with birds, insects, deer, and other small fauna. However, and I learned this fucking lesson, if you stop hearing the birds and bugs chirping, get the fuck back in your car and leave. You are not alone, and something is watching and waiting. I've heard foxes scream, and I've heard big cats scream. But in those woods, I've heard women scream in terror that seemed like it came from just ahead in the thicket. I've seen my friends shit bricks because of twigs snapping underfoot, hoof. Maybe, from right behind us. It's surreal, being so far away from anything out there. No one to help. I became a cop, got my concealed carry permit statewide, never go in a woods without my side piece, personal off-duty is Glock 20, not even to LARP around. Stay safe, friends.
Be me. Living in New Jersey. Buddies and I all decide to check out Clinton Road. Supposed to be super haunted or something. We get there and drive down a long spooky road. The only thing that happened was that we all lost service right at the start, and as soon as we started driving down the road, Siri told us to make a U-turn here. Fast forward a month or two. Decide to go down the road again because late night spooks. This time, something actually shows up. Driving down the road when one of us catches something outside of the car. Car pulls to a stop and we all whip our flashlights over to it. Light-absorbing, hulking figure just barely in the woods, all hunched over. Looked like some kind of huge human that was dragging its arms and torso on the ground. Red reflective eyes that locked onto us. And finally the thing had horns or something. Like a six-rack. We start driving away in silence and it seems to just slide to follow us without movement. We're collectively internally losing our shit at this point. Driver ends up making a turn and the thing disappears from view. Driver shouts out, "Oh fuck." He suddenly loses his cool completely and whips it down the road, almost killing us like 10 times until we're in the clear and out of the spooky woods. Apparently, he heard a girl whisper in his ear or something. Fast forward again until winter time. I'm alone in my dorm room playing vidya on laptop and on TV. Christmas lights are hanging, so it was probably Christmas or I was lazy. Anyway, I step outside of my door to go for a smoke. Always make sure to close my door properly because I don't want my dorm smelling like smoke and they finding out that I'm not smoking at the smoke pit. Door suddenly slams open with brute force hard enough to crush an anvil. I slowly turn around to look back into my dorm. TV and laptop are off. Lights are all flickering. Slowly turn my head to look at the fucking mirror/sink combo conveniently located so you can see yourself from the doorway. Right over my left shoulder are those same fucking glowing eyes from before. They're not attached to anything, just floating there. Oh god, WTF.jpg. Flick cigarette into the snow nearby and step inside of my dorm. Maintain contact the whole way. Slam my door shut as soon as I'm safe inside. As soon as door is shut and locked, power stops being funky. Laptop boots back up. TV on. Lights not flickering. So did I almost die that day or what? Rest of my experiences don't involve those fucking eyes. Never saw them again. The rest are just one-off weird creepy shit.
Me and a few buddies decided to venture out there one night after drinking a lot. We lived about 2 hours away, so we packed into my friend's Xterra. Driver was sober, and headed there. We got there, drove down it, and parked near the Dead Man's Curve. Me and 2 of my friends hopped out of the car and headed down a random path for a while. Eventually, we saw a big bonfire in the distance. Knowing the lore behind the road, my friends noped out immediately and I quickly followed. We hopped back into the car and told everyone else what we saw. After that, we headed down the road and after seeing nothing for a while, decided to turn back. Within a few seconds of turning around, a pair of high beams suddenly lit up our car. The phantom truck. Everyone started flipping shit excitedly and laughing. We started speeding away from the lights as fast as we could, but they kept up, never trailing more than a few feet, no matter how fast we went. I was in the front passenger seat. Eventually, I started to get a weird feeling in my stomach and told the driver to stop. He did, and the headlights behind us did as well. We stayed parked in the middle of the road for a good 2 or 3 minutes before the car moved to pass us. It was a white pickup truck from the 70s, too dark to see who was driving it. After the truck passed and drove out of sight, we started moving forward again. Less than a quarter mile from where we stopped, we got a dead man's curve. If we hadn't stopped, we'd have hit it going 70 miles per hour in a top-heavy, lifted Xterra. There's no chance we wouldn't have flipped the car at that speed. To this day, I don't know if it was locals trying to scare us or something more paranormal. But what I do know is that if I hadn't made the driver stop when I did, we would have either been seriously injured or potentially died.
I've been waiting to find the right time to share this story, but I never knew the right place to share. As a 16-year-old in New Jersey, I was eagerly waiting to get my driver's license. The weekend before my birthday, I had convinced my mom that we should drive to Clinton Road, the allegedly most haunted road in America. If I can drive that road, the road test will be no problem. Not going to bother explaining why this place is allegedly haunted, you have Google. We arrived early at first, parking near the trail entrance to Cross Castle. I actually didn't realize it was the castle, but the foundation was all that remained after it was burned down. The day was actually quite peaceful, and nature surrounded me. The only horror I could see was the condition the road was in. It was as if the 3-foot-deep potholes, fallen trees, and wrecked barriers were intentionally left. Figuring that a shitty back road was a shitty back road, I didn't find this spooky at all. Keep in mind, I'm not someone who believes in the paranormal, so this entire trip was mostly for shits and giggles. Later, around 11 p.m., my mother and I returned to the road to do a nighttime drive and stroll. We parked at the outlet of the Dead Man's Curve, where people can park and sit by the foggy lake. Dead Man's Curve is a curve which comes up past a footbridge that has caused many deaths and accidents over the years. Even after placing a concrete barrier, the location is home to multiple bumpers and shattered headlights from unaware drivers. There are no lights on this road. With your high beams on, you can maybe see 15 feet in front of you. The darkness over the woods is almost engulfing until you get to the major roadway at the end. Fun fact and important to remember, this is the longest red light in the state. This place is a textbook horror movie location. After parking, my mother and I stepped out of the car. Me, feeling invincible, decides to act like a fool to calm my mother. As we walked out near the road, close to the footbridge, I felt a sudden grab to my arm. It's my mom, she's whimpering like a scared dog. I escort her back to the car and try to calm her down. She tells me, I saw a boy. I didn't connect the two, but she doesn't know the legends about the young boy at the footbridge. I wasn't even at the footbridge, so I waved it off as her seeing things. I tried to coax her out, doing Fortnite dances. This was 2 years ago, and being a jackass was my specialty. This did nothing, so I got in the car defeated and started to drive. As soon as we pulled onto the road, 2 cars came right behind me. One looked like a muscle car of sorts, another being a rather old-looking truck. I was shocked, as the way they had come would have guaranteed I saw them before they were right behind me. How did I not see the light in the distance? I should have been able to see them, but I didn't. These cars, which in hindsight matched the cars that the legends say are known to haunt the road, were hard to make out. The light reflecting from the high beams they were flashing blinded my poor mother, who was no longer calming down. I was irritated more than anything, figuring some locals just didn't like their road being roamed late by YouTubers like Mikey Manfus. As I kept driving, I realized they were on my ass, like literally 2 inches from my rear bumper was the truck. I was going 30 down this winding and horribly kept road, trying not to mistake the dirt service trails to the reservoir as the road. Pretty soon, keep in mind this road is barely a 2-lane road, the muscle car was trying to pass. It wasn't even going faster than me, it would match my speed, which got close to 50, and then started to merge. I would then accelerate to avoid being hit. My mother was practically comatose at this point. Her chest was pounding and I was worried she was having one of my family's genetic heart attacks. After a while of these two cars harassing me, I had some thoughts that I was about to have a real-life deliverance situation. These locals are gunts, I kept saying, trying to stop my mom from panicking. That didn't really do much besides get me a flurry of sputtering noises. At the end of the road, there are a few streets with residential homes on it. I figured if these pricks wouldn't let up, I would just hide in the street and let them pass. I saw the light near the major highway turn red as I approached, and I wasn't going to wait at the light with these assholes behind me. So I channeled my inner Forza Horizon 2 experience and nearly killed us. Not sure how we didn't crash, but I drifted into this street like a pro. Stopping to catch my breath, my mom was pale, and had her hands covering her tear-soaked face. She just wanted to go to the hotel nearby and sleep off whatever the fuck just happened. IK turned out of the road, practice for the road test after all, and headed back onto the road. Yes, I'm that white guy in a horror movie. To my surprise, nobody was at the light. The two cars must have been going 50 miles per hour, and they didn't show signs of stopping when I drifted into the side street. The only possible explanation is that they flew into the highway, but that wouldn't have ended well. Instead, they were just gone. I didn't know what to think. That red light is something like 5 minutes, it didn't change and they didn't even show skid marks like I did. They just disappeared. On the way back, it was dead silent. Not anything from the radio, which was mostly static apart from some random New York City channels I picked up. Even outside when I rolled down the windows, I heard nothing. No crickets or birds. It was like when there's predators around and nature turns silent. The only thing which I saw, that horrified me, were mangled raccoons. At first, I figured it was roadkill. So, this roadkill was off. All these raccoons had their intestines pulled out of them. I didn't see them when I drove down the road, and I figured maybe the two assholes were why I didn't see them. I was too busy not dying and getting assaulted by mud to focus on the scenery. We made it back to the hotel room, and I crashed like a log. The next day we went back to confirm what we saw. The roadkill was gone, and when I reached the curve we parked by where my mother saw the boy. I didn't find anything other than a small tennis ball where my mother saw the apparition allegedly, which I sure as shit kept because fuck that boy. I also noticed a lot of the carvings in benches from couples got slashed out. I have a pic of that I will share too, but besides that it was a calm scenic area like it was in the daytime the previous day. Overall, I don't know what happened. It just felt like an experience right out of a creepy pasta story and I can't make sense of it. On the bright side I fucking aced the road test and was the first of my friends to get their license. If you go to this road, just don't be a dumbass like I was. If you do, be respectful and don't floss at the bridge boy. Here's the only other photo I'll share since I don't feel like putting my face out. This is the view from where we parked, near where my mom saw the little boy.
Hi New Jersey, friend here. I had a spoopy occurrence on Clinton Road, apparently the most haunted road in the world. This is my first green text, so here goes. Be me. Senior in high school. Friends decide to go to Clinton Road 'cause reputation. Half of us in one car, half in my car. Get through all the way to the end. Nothing spoopy but dark AF and extremely creepy vibe. Have to go through again to get back home, takes about 10 to 15 minutes to go all the way through. On way back me and friends notice a pair of headlights a few hundred feet going opposite direction of us. Go over hill and headlights cut out briefly. Make it over hill, no headlights. A bit spooked. Turn on high beams, no car pulled off to the side, people do that to fuck with you. WTF. Ask friends, and we all agreed we saw another set of car headlights. Still don't know what happened. Not the scariest, but it was enough to get the fuck out of there. It could have been some dude fucking with us, but there are few side roads, the ones that are there are gated usually. New Jersey is filled with weird spooks. Surprised people on /x/don't talk about it more.
Legends of the Blue Hole. One of the most storied sites in all of southern New Jersey is a mysterious body of water known as the Blue Hole. Located deep in the Pine Barrens of Winslow, on the border of Camden and Gloucester counties, this small but legendary pool is said to not only be bottomless, but also a frequent pit stop of the Jersey Devil. Though its icy blue-tinged water might seem inviting, especially on a hot summer day, locals warn their children to stay away from the Blue Hole and to never go swimming there. Tales of unexplained whirlpools which suck down hapless swimmers have long been part of the hole's lore. Some who have been lucky enough to escape its clutches have claimed that they actually felt something, perhaps the Jersey Devil himself, pulling them down into the chilly depths. The bottom of the Blue Hole, if indeed there is a bottom, is said to be made of a fine sand, sometimes referred to as sugar sand, which locals liken to quicksand. When we visited the notorious hole, we found ourselves navigating through narrow pine land trails made up of this same treacherous sand. Sure that at any moment our Jeep would get hopelessly bogged down, we decided to ditch the vehicle and continue our quest on foot. It was a beautiful autumn day as we wandered the wooded paths of the Winslow Wildlife Management Area. The underbrush was awash with bright cranberry red and golden-colored leaves, and the sound of birds chirping filled the sweet-smelling air. As we approached the Blue Hole, though, the atmosphere seemed to change. The birds were heard no more, and in their stead was an eerie silence. The quiet was soon shattered, however, by the echoes of shotgun blasts from a nearby firing range which rang through the tranquil forest. The surface of the Blue Hole was as still as glass, and a thermometer that we'd brought to measure its temperature read a chilly 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Although the water was crystal clear, we could see no signs of life in the hole whatsoever. No fish, no insects, nothing. There was something unsettling about this void, and suddenly it seemed easy to imagine why people might warn their children not to venture into these waters. Although it might have a bad reputation now, this was not always the case with the Blue Hole. In the 1930s, the site was a popular picnic spot and swimming hole amongst the locals. In the 1940s, though, a storm washed out a wooden bridge over the nearby Egg Harbor River, cutting off the main access route to the Blue Hole. Ever since then, it has remained isolated in a dense forest of scrub pines, accessible only by foot or off-road vehicle. The Blue Hole is approximately 130 across, almost perfectly round, and has steep banks. Its waters remain curiously cold, even in the hottest summer months, averaging about 58 degrees. Unlike most bodies of water in the Pine Barrens, which bear a coloration similar to tea due to the high content of iron, tannic acid, and suspended sediment, the water of the Blue Hole is perfectly clear. There are several theories as to how the Blue Hole came to be. Some say that it is the result of a meteorite striking the Earth. Others claim that it is what geologists call a pingo. A pingo is a small body of water which is the result of an ice mass which forms beneath permanently frozen soil during an ice age. The ice mass expands for thousands of years, then breaks through the permafrost to create a depression rimmed by a hill. When the climate warms, the ice melts, forming a pool. But what about the fabled whirlpools, or what the locals refer to as whirlypools, which are said to drag down unsuspecting swimmers to their watery graves? How could such a current exist in such a seemingly placid body of water? One explanation for this might be that the blue hole is fed by groundwater, not the nearby stream. This fact accounts for why the water does not contain the same murky color as the river, and might also be the reason for the mysterious surges of current. Scientific rationale does little to lessen the mysteries of this curious body of water though, which seem to run as deep as the blue hole itself.
I'll start with some background. When I was a little kid, me and my dad were camping in the Pine Barrens. While there we went to the Leeds House, where supposedly the Jersey Devil was born. It's a spooky old place in the woods. All that remains is the foundation covered in bushes and weeds. You really aren't supposed to go there, but we snuck in anyway. While we walked around the perimeter of the house, I took a piece of rock from the foundation. I never thought anything of it, even though my dad told me not to disturb the house. So fast forward to about a year ago. I was diving in South Jersey, in what is considered devil territory. I was asking the locals for spots where there was a lot of fish. I already had an idea where to go, but wanted the local perspective. They pointed me in the direction of the bay. I have been in the pines before, but never to fish. They told me about a nice place to push off. It was out of the forest, so I didn't have to worry about swimmers or trespassing. So I took my kayak out about 500 yards offshore and dove down and tied my anchor. Things were going well until I felt this cold shiver, and it got very dark. I assumed it was just an overcast. When I caught a good amount of fish, I started to swim back to my kayak. To my surprise, it was gone. I dove and saw the line had been cut. I started to panic. I was not only afraid of drowning, but I was afraid I was in boat traffic. So I started the long swim back to shore, and I saw the kayak about 100 yards down the shore. So I headed over. When I got to the kayak, there was a fish with its head caved in from a rock. Then I really shit my pants when I looked down shore and saw hoof prints running into the forest. I drove my car down to where the kayak rushed ashore and sped out of there. That night I looked all over my house until I found the rock. Then the next day, I drove back down and put it back at Leeds House. I'm sure there are plenty of explanations, but it scared me.
As a consequence of the recent events, I can't trust myself anymore and I really need an outside opinion. Maybe someone has encountered a similar phenomenon. I will attach some pictures I took during those events. Hope there's a rational explanation. However, if you're looking for a reveal of the truth at the end of the story or an explanation from me, you are not going to find it here. I just simply can't think of one. 3 years ago, in 2016, my girlfriend and I moved into a house in New Jersey. It wasn't in a good shape when we bought it, but with a lot of cleaning and redecorating it became quite cozy for the two of us. 3 years passed and now I feel like I know this house rather well, at least I thought so a week ago. Last Monday there was a storm, and a big portion of the house flooded. We have never varnished the old wooden floors, so the day after the flood I discovered that in some rooms they were completely ruined. Hiring a big crew to fix everything would be too expensive, so I decided to fix it myself. With some help from Google I researched what I needed to buy and on the next day I started repairing the damage. It was pretty easy actually. By the evening I had already finished the bedroom and moved to my office. I was taking away the old wooden boards, when suddenly I stumbled on an area, which was a bit different. 4 of the boards closer to a corner had a lot more nails in them and some of their edges were broken off. It was definitely harder to remove those, but after applying a bit more force, they also popped off and revealed what was underneath them. Covered with a piece of cloth, a painting lay under the floor. I was very surprised and excited by the discovery, mostly because of an idea of selling it. I threw a flashlight on it and started examining it, looking for some sort of a signature. It was a portrait of a man and a girl, both looking at each other with their hands inches away from touching. Their wide-opened mouths and eyes were a bit unsettling, but mostly the painting just looked freaky and even funny. That was before I took a closer look at their palms. They both had stigmata, a puncture wound in the center of a hand. A chill ran down my spine. Not really sure if it was the darkness of the room, the complete silence, or just an imaginary mind, but I immediately put the painting back under the floor and left the room. I fast walked to the bedroom and immediately switched on the lights. My girlfriend was too sleepy to wait for me to finish working in the bedroom. She just fell asleep on the couch. I took off my clothes and fell asleep on the bed, trying not to think about the weird painting. That night I had uncanny dreams about these faces I saw on the painting and the punctured hands. I didn't have nightmares for a long time, but that night I was rolling around in a cold sweat. I woke up to my girlfriend screaming my name. Her face looked terrified. I couldn't make out the words she was saying. Everything was still very foggy. She suddenly grabbed my wrist and raised it. There was a stigmata on my hand. I froze in a silent horror. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. I threw my hand back. It was bleeding all over the bedsheets. Only when I saw the wound did I feel the pain. My palm was hand from the inside as if my blood was set on fire. I ran to the bathroom and put my hand under a stream of cold water, while my girlfriend brought bandages. I threw up while she was putting them on. I still remember her terrified eyes and shaking hands. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. She was sure that I did it to myself. Can't blame her, that's what I would assume too. The morning after I returned to my office and checked if the painting was still there. I was kind of hoping that it would just disappear and I won't have to see it ever again. But no, it was still there under the floor. I pulled it out and brought it to a window, to examine it closer under the sunlight. No signatures, no initials, no markings, as if the painter didn't intend for it to be seen by anyone but himself. I also found a cassette taped to the back of the painting. It looked quite old and dusty, like ones produced in the early 70s. There was only one word written on it with a fat black marker: suffer. The strange feeling that I had last night came back. It wasn't fear, I wasn't afraid. It's the feeling that you get when your phone runs out of battery while you are in the middle of nowhere at night so far away from home. I felt helpless in front of this cassette, helpless in front of the painting, and helpless in front of its author. And only then I felt afraid. I didn't show the painting to my girlfriend. Among the two of us, she has always been the believer and I was the skeptic. She still was very quiet from last night. This would be too much for her. Later that day I went to Best Buy and got a cassette player. As soon as I came back, I made sure my girlfriend could not hear the recording and inserted the cassette into the player. At first, it was just white noise, but then I heard a voice. Even though the recording was really distorted, it was clear that it's a man talking to someone named Lora. Are they the same man and woman from the painting? Is he talking to his wife? His daughter? He had long pauses in his speech, as if he was also doing something else. He talked about hell and suffering. I felt chills running down my back again. It got harder to breathe. Now I realize that it must have been a panic attack. I stopped the player at the end of the recording. That's when I noticed that I was bleeding again. My bandages were all soaked in blood and the pain returned. 2 hours have passed since I listened to the recording. The cassette and player are still on the table in front of me while I am writing this. I am going to attach a picture of the wound on my hand and the painting as the proof. I will also attach the recording that was on the tape that I found. As I said in the beginning, I can't think of a rational explanation for all this. It's getting dark already and I am really fucking scared for the upcoming night. Please, if anyone has something similar happen to them, tell me what to do.
He never posted the images.
Be me, a small child going to see his grandparents for a week around Christmas time. Grandparents are Pineys. Grandparents' house is technically considered waterfront property even though the river was dammed up years ago and serves as a place for turkeys to nest in and make noises at night. Welcome to New Jersey. My mother had 3 sisters. All my aunts were childless at the time and liked me, there was also my uncle from my father's side who lived nearby. Grandfather wasn't thrilled about me whatsoever. He was a hard ass who was an army clerk during the 60s and liked being in Saudi Arabia far too much. My uncle was a former helicopter pilot and all he learned fighting in Korea was that he was happy and liked weed. Everyone in the house gathering, except for my parents and my baby sister, smoked. I was a quiet child and brought books with me to read. Also I watched a lot of basic cable and I think I had every episode of The Critic burned into my brain, along with a copy of Shonen Jump I bought at a local bookstore. Basically, my parents didn't have much setup to do, and trusted me to be on my own. Anyway, I distinctly remembered 9 adults, my parents, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncle, and one guy in his early 20s who lived in the basement, where the guest room I was staying in was. I liked him because when he was in line of sight, the smell of smoke somehow vanished. He always wore a red shirt and came from the room I later learned was my grandmother's art studio, not a bedroom, and went even further than the basement, being totally underground instead of opening out into the backyard. He always kept close to the walls and usually stayed in front of, but not opening, the glass panel doors that led to the backyard. Sometimes he sort of lingered around the couch, assuming a position similar to the Howdy Doody doll displayed on a small wooden chair next to the couch. He was never entirely in my line of sight, but I never felt a malevolent presence. I never saw him leave, because I often just fell asleep watching television. Christmas came and went, never saw the man outside the basement. Never talked about it, mostly forgot about it. Later learned that my mother had a brother who died from a drug overdose before I was born after going through birth records. I was told he died from drowning, but it's clear that was a euphemism the family had internally. He looked exactly like the man who came from the basement, if a little skinnier. My sister, years later, said that she also remembered a teenager at the house that Christmas, they played with marbles a lot. Said that she remembered how the smell of smoke went away too, although she said that he smelled like how a frog smells. Thanks Febreeze Uncle Ghost.
Hey/X/. I'm not that big of a poster here, I lurk a shit ton and run into cool stuff across the board, but I have yet to really find the thing I've had an encounter with. Maybe you guys can help me out. About 1.5 years ago, in the middle of summer, my girlfriend and the time and I were walking along a beach at around 10 p.m. in southern New Jersey. Immediately upon stepping on the beach, I had a bad feeling in my gut. The kind of feeling you get when something goes horribly wrong beyond anything you're used to. Now, I'm not a heavy spiritual person, so I say fuck it, I'm trying to fuck a girl on this beach, we'll be fine. As we walk through the sand towards the water, the feeling only gets worse. I'm on high alert now, as my gut is usually right, and I'm looking all around trying to see what's setting me off. To our left is a small hole, and beyond the hole is a lifeguard boathouse. Phone light on, hole seems normal. I step closer to the hole and immediately feel the hairs raise on the back of my neck and my arms. My body is screaming at me not to go near this hole or take any kind of steps towards the boathouse. I cannot move a step further at this point. Every time I try, my body hijacks my legs and holds them in place. My girl is confused at why I'm acting weird. I tell her something isn't right, I don't know what it is. As I look up towards the boathouse, I see movement. In the dim-ass light of the beachfront hotels, a figure crouches in front of the boathouse. It seems to be about the size of a normal person. From what I can tell though, this thing is pure black. Not African black, not night black, but a complete absence of light. It's time to fucking leave, I don't want to wait until this fucker stands up. I grab the girl and turn back towards land. She protests a bit but butts right up when I tell her there's something at the boathouse. Tell her not to turn around, no fucking matter what, we are leaving. As we hot foot it the fuck out of there, I feel it turn to watch us go. Its eyes, or whatever the fuck it saw with, were boring into the back of my neck. Keep pushing her up, keep telling her not to look back. As we pass the dunes and are in for the final stretch, I still feel it looking at us even though the dunes are too high for it to see us at this point. Me being the dumbass I am, I gotta know if it's following us. So I turn around. At the top of the dunes behind us, I see it for a split second before I turn and run. The image of this thing is seared into my memory. It was double the size of before, no light would land on this thing's form. The shadow was climbing over the top of the dune soundlessly, not leaving an imprint in the sand. A black ring of the same lightness dark went above its head from shoulder to shoulder. It was moving towards us. I take off, dragging my girl along. She starts freaking out, but I'm too busy pushing her and yelling at her dumb ass to get the fuck off the fucking beach. We make it up the ramp and onto cement. I don't let us stop running until we're a block away from the sand. I turn around and see it again, at the top of the wooden ramp where it meets the sidewalk. It's shrunken again, back to original size, and crouching on all fours. Doesn't seem to want to move into the cement, thank fuck. To be safe, I had my girl guide us while I walked backwards to keep my eyes on it until it was out of sight. Looked like an idiot, but at least I'm alive. To this day, I'll occasionally feel that exact same feeling of terror I did on the beach. It's always at night, always around 10 p.m. It's been a few months since I felt it last, but I haven't seen the fucker since that first night. Does this thing sound like something any of you know? What the fuck did I run into? Pic related, this is the closest picture I could find that reminded me of that fucking thing, it's just missing the ring on its head.
I've got a couple stories, mostly from my friends and I fucking around in the rural Northeast since starting college. I was a suburbanite, despite that having its own happenings, until I left, so a lot of this shit is new to me. This was from between my first and second semesters. I'm not great at Greentext, so I'll do some if I feel it's pertinent. I was 17 at the time, and had just finished my first semester. During winter break, some of my friends and I made plans to spend the week of New Year's together, at my friend's house in rural New Jersey. Plenty of woods, hills for sledding, skiing, snowmobiling, what have you. I had arrived the night before everyone else was going to, so it was just me and him. Let's call him T-something T, and I had done over the course of the fall season was make a habit of walking, driving around our region late into the morning, and just talking. Deformed sleep schedules and unresolved emotional trauma are powerful tools for friendship building. Anyway, it was like 2 a.m., and we decided we were gonna go out for a drive. I usually drove, 'cause I was the one with a car, but he had just bought a used Ford Bronco that he loved to drive, so I let him. We're about 2 hours into our drive, and we're a good hour or so out from his house, driving forest roads that he wasn't familiar with. At some point, I'm rambling and looking off into the woods, and I feel myself lurch forward, hard. Broncos are heavy cars, and we had a good bit of speed going. Over the sound of the tires screeching, I hear him yelling, "Fuck, fuck, fuck," and then I am thrown back into my seat by a big crunchy thunk sound. Despite never hitting an animal before, I put 2 and 2 together and figured a deer had been on the poor receiving end of the juice mobile. Once the car had settled, and I raised my head, I found I was right. About 30 or so feet in front of us, off to the right, there was a deer on the side of the road, covered in what was probably blood. I looked over to T, and saw him white-knuckling the steering wheel, and taking shallow breaths, pretty white-faced. I asked him if he was okay, and, despite a quiver in his voice, he said yeah. At the time, I was pretty out of it, but I was sure I'd heard something about checking if a deer you hit is alive, calling local police if so. I said as such, and went for the door handle, only for him to re-lock it as soon as I hit the button. I asked him what was up, and, without taking his eyes off the road, said that he thought something was wrong. He stuttered out that it looked like the deer flew in front of the car, and that it was bloody before he hit it. I turned around to face him, and as I did it, I involuntarily scanned the tree line off to the left of the car, and thought I saw something in the distance. I narrowed my eyes, and what I saw quite literally scared me into complete silence. Whatever it was long as fuck, and was slumped up against a tree trunk the way a squirrel would be, but think like the size of a person. After my gaze settled on it, I saw it was moving, breathing in the same way that a dog would pant and their whole body moves. I was completely stunned, and after about 3 seconds of silence, T, still not moving his gaze, says, "You see it too?" Another second, and he slams on the accelerator. As we haul ass off, I see it react and slither down the tree, and back into the forest. By the time either of us are back in the present, we've already broken 70, and are far gone. We didn't talk much about it until we got back to his house. I tried to bring it up, but he was clearly really upset by it, so I left it alone. The rest of the week went by uneventfully, but he didn't let us fuck around in the woods on his property after dark, understandably so.
Be 2 years ago. Live in a shitty apartment in a shitty part of Newark. I know that doesn't really pin things down, given it's Newark, but there were always cops posted outside and it wasn't uncommon for shootouts and dead bodies to occur on the street below. Lived there with my sister and her girlfriend, who we'll call E and O. She had solid weed, was constantly high, and had no problem walking around the house topless. She had ADHD, and wasn't the smartest person, buying into Illuminati bullshit. She was really caring though and actually an amazingly clever business person. Being a stoner with dreads from a poor family probably didn't help in getting her to get too far up the entrepreneurial ladder, though. E is an amazing singer and okay painter. She believes in all that energy crystal bullshit though, along with witchcraft and tarot cards. I love her, but she's actually kind of a psychopath, mostly nice and carefree to others until she has no use for them, then brutally tossing them aside if they get in her way. Me, I was recently medically discharged from the military at that point due to back issues and PTSD. Don't worry, this isn't one of those, and then I pulled out my katana stories, just establishing the setting, and it likely explains why it took us so long to realize what was going on. We're all some type of crazy, so it just seemed par for the course. Anyway, the apartment building. It was this horrid old thing that was tan on the outside and had 9 floors. The inside was this ugly yellow-green with wood painted over with the ugliest brown possible. The elevator was one of those old, gate door things which you needed to slam open, though it wasn't an issue since it barely ever worked anyway. We lived on the 7th floor. You can imagine how fun that was on summer days. The landlord was some sort of Hispanic, who also owned the corner store across the street. At the time A was obsessed with Broad City and would loudly stream it on Hulu to drown out the sound of our crackhead neighbors unfamiliar with the concept of having an indoor voice. A would often go on the fire escape to smoke a joint, and the first weird thing to happen was she got locked out there for about 3 hours. The window was heavy as shit and hard to bring down and lock, so it was fairly impossible for it to happen accidentally. It was just me there and I was locked in my room reading, so I didn't hear her yell, and boy was she pissed after thinking it was me pulling a prank. That kinda went out the window though when she got back in and noticed the laptop she had been streaming on had basically every image file she had open. I'm neurotic as shit and won't touch other people's things just in case something went missing, but as she closed the images she saw her laptop camera had been taking pictures. Nothing too mysterious, just the bookshelf it was pointed at. Her reaction was mostly along the lines of, "Whoa, spoopy," but not too worried. Later that day, E comes back from work, sees our story and raises us with one of her own from the hallway. This was one of the days the elevator was working, but shitty as it was, it got stuck halfway through the 4th floor. She presses the emergency button, and sees a pair of legs passing by, which she calls to press the elevator button to see if it would go up. Anyway, the red shoes didn't respond, and when she tried to get closer to see who it was, they instinctively backed away. Whatever, crackheads. She wasn't there for long before someone pressed the button at least, but about 3 days later we found out this wasn't an isolated incident. Someone new had been moving in on the next floor, and apparently got locked into their apartment when they were trying to head back down to get more boxes. The door wasn't locked and the knob turned, but it refused to give up. We found this out after he complained about the landlord's reaction, which was basically nervously smiling and nodding as if he didn't understand. Those were the calm days. He had this rule to not respond to knocks on the door unless she expected them, believing it was either someone asking for money, trying to get us to go to their church, or trying to rob us. This was reasonable since the first 2 would be a thing during the day. I should mention at this point I'd decided to sleep on the living room couch. I'd been sleeping on just a mattress at one point, but after waking up to a rat crawling out from the heater right next to my pillow I noped the fuck out of there. It was about 3 in the morning when I woke up to knocking at a weird pace. I figured it was a crackhead, and ignored it. It kept on going. At that point I got mad, grabbing a knife from the kitchen and looking through the keyhole to see no one there. I opened the door anyway, only to find 2 other neighbors looking out their apartment, both claiming it was their door that had been knocked on. The next day one of the neighbors, this Caribbean dude who I'm pretty sure was an attorney from how he dressed, asked me and the other neighbor to back him up in talking to the landlord so we could see the cameras on the elevator and stairs and see if we could find out who it was. Landlord admits the cameras didn't actually work, and B was not having it. He filed a police report and threatened to sue if they didn't replace the cameras, and kept bugging the landlord for a few days. Then suddenly he stopped. We got curious when we found the cops and ambulance leaving our floor, and A, being our spokesperson, was the one who asked B's girl. Apparently since that night he hadn't been sleeping much, and though we thought he was just pissed about the cameras, she said he'd just been getting overall angry and crazy over time. This led to her waking up to finding him at the door in nothing but boxers, having pissed himself and being completely unresponsive. They took him to the hospital, but not before she had to drag his body out of the door's way. This wasn't unusual by the way, crackheads and whatnot, so people figured he OD, but he seemed pretty up and up. I'll admit we probably should have followed up, but we didn't. So it was E who kind of mentioned the next part. B's girl had sort of just started acting way too happy, responding to E's chit-chat with an unbreaking smile and vague responses. It was a bit later when people started suggesting that maybe she poisoned B herself, but there wasn't too much investigation into it. A few days later, the other neighbor that had opened the door with me had called the cops on her. Apparently she'd been knocking on his door at 3 a.m., in nothing but a shirt and underwear, still not breaking her smile. This neighbor had a family, so a mournful booty call was unlikely. He mentioned, though, that he did try to open the door at one point, but it wouldn't open, and the cops had to come up the stairs because the elevator wouldn't open. So she literally just stood there smiling until they came, and freaked the fuck out kicking and screaming when they took her away. I was actually more surprised they hadn't shot her. Anyway, that neighbor started getting ready to move out soon after as well, but apparently the crazy lady hadn't been the last straw. Soon after, the neighbor's daughter, who was like 12, started acting weird herself. The parents didn't want to go into detail, but their 10-year-old son had no such qualms. She had been dragging herself against the wall and floors, kind of like a cat with a really bad itch, his description, and when asked why she just responded by denying it, despite very much still doing it as she did much to their frustration. They eventually found her, pressing her parts against the corner of a wall, without any pants on, and shortly after whooping the crap out of her, decided it was this place driving her crazy. "Oh boy, it's our turn." That was A's joke, having noticed the pattern. We were the ones left that had opened the door that night, and I couldn't really say much, having been the one that opened the door. Of course, responded by trying to do cleansing spells and all that new age magic stuff to try to ward things off, but that didn't work out too well for us. Being the hyper-energetic puppy that she is, had been up late smoking a joint on the fire escape. Now directly on the windowsill to prevent any lockouts. She freaked out and started panicking. However, after seeing E standing outside in the middle of the street, naturally she freaked out, thinking E was in bed asleep, and yelled out her name trying to get her attention. I woke up to her rushing into the room to put a shirt on, ready to run downstairs after her, only to be met with a pissed off E, now sitting up awake in bed. E complained that she was high, but all three of us are very much aware that's not how weed works. The next night, I woke up to a shaking me awake freaking out. She claimed that E was gone, which made no sense, since she'd have to have passed by me to get out of the apartment. We both simultaneously looked out the window with the fire escape, but luckily didn't see any E pancake down the street. A decides she's gonna go down anyway, but when she tries to open the front door, it doesn't budge. She has me try, but I can't manage it either. Looking through the keyhole to see if anything was in the way, but it was just black, as if something was blocking it. That's when I notice out in the hall it sounds like there's a bunch of people running. Like, stampede-level amounts of footsteps, and we start to freak out. A is starting to cry when we suddenly hear screaming coming from my room. Now, my room isn't big, it's basically a square with a surprisingly deep closet E kept stuff stored in. It did apparently benefit in having great acoustics though, because the scream was loud as fuck. Like, painfully loud. We burst in to see the closet door trying to shake open, and A opens it with me right behind. The weird thing is, the scream kept going up until the closet door was fully open, but when we opened it, there E was, with the widest, creepiest fucking grin I'd ever seen her make. A sort of burst back and grabbed onto me, because when we opened the door, she was right there, almost nose to nose with her, unflinching. Moments later she responded as if she'd just woken up, confused as shit as to where she was. I tried to go back to bed with her, but was still freaking out, and frankly scared of her, so me and her just stayed up the rest of the night. The next day we decided to move out, staying at A's aunt's for a while until we found a new place, and only going to get our stuff during the day. E, being the asshole that she is, later recommended the building to a friend, who lasted there for about a month before moving out after becoming violently ill, and telling us about a pair of neighbors that were found dead in our old apartment. I'm not entirely sure if that wasn't just crack though. Anyway, fuck that place, and fuck Newark.
Fuck. Sounds like you guys got out at the right time.
I'm not gonna lie. We were both kind of assholes to E for a bit, avoiding eye contact and being alone with her, but we were pretty fucking terrified. It was literally just her smiling, but I'd known her for 22 years and never seen her be able to smile that widely. It was almost like her mouth had stretched out. She's the one that suggested later that maybe it was something roaming the hallway, which explains why we couldn't get to it whenever shit was going on. But that didn't explain her being in the street. We didn't really get a lot of answers, and we weren't really trying to. There weren't any after effects once we left though, so she's good now at least.
You guys know about Clinton Road, here in New Jersey? In case you don't know, Clinton Road is an infamous stretch that cuts through a forest. There are no lights whatsoever, and sign maintenance hasn't been updated since the 50s. It's rife with Klan members and was the dumping site for a professional killer. Me and my friends are standard bravado douchebags, and one night we decide to check out if all the stories we're told hold up. They didn't. What we got was far, far worse than any story. We were coming back from a movie in the Palisades, and we figure, hey, it's right there, might as well. Only, we aren't as good with predicting distance time as we figure, so it takes an obscenely long time to finally get to the road itself. It's smack dab in the middle of winter and there's about 4 feet of snow on the ground easy. We joke about how we're going to see a jackalope and oh fuck we're going to get chased by the hellhound. As I said, we're a bunch of loudmouth pricks. Only, slowly but surely, the morale in the car is getting more and more quiet. It seems to get darker as the time passes. At one point we pull over just to see how dark it is with the lights off, and it is pitch black. Complete and utter darkness. We start up again and we are not having fun anymore. Now, there's a bridge about halfway through that if you throw a penny off of, it'll get thrown back at you all spooky like. This is our goal, and by God at this point we just want to do this and go home. We finally get there and park just off to the side in this little niche right next to the bridge. We decide it's best to leave the car on just in case the penny comes back and we void our bowels. Better safe than sorry. There are 4 of us in this little sedan, and the 2 in the front get out and need to pull up the seats, so it takes a little longer for me and my other friend to get out. Of course the bastards don't wait for us, and by the time we finally get out they're already halfway down the bridge. It's extremely cold. My winter coat doesn't help. The bridge is set up so that in the moonlight you can see clearly down the road. It's dark as all holy hell, but you can still make out if there was a car coming. There's no place to hide at all. It's dead silent and I can hear every crunch of my friend's footsteps on the dry gravel 20 feet away. As we walk up to them, we see that they've stopped dead in their tracks. They spin on their heels and start walking back to us at a distressingly fast rate.
Get the fuck back into the car, we have to leave.
I was already shifting bricks, so I don't question it. We run back into the car and get ready to pull out as fast as we can. That's when I see them. In the brake lights I see 2 figures striding towards us. They were walking extremely relaxed, but at a very fast pace. The one I saw almost clearly was tall. Taller than I am, and I'm 6 feet tall. I want to say it was wearing a white hoodie only because from what I saw it was completely white from the waist up. The other one was much darker. I could barely see it, whatever it was. As we start to spin around to go back from where we came, it stops walking relaxed and starts power walking towards us even faster. And then it stops. And then it's gone. We finally turn around and get going. The road is extremely perilous, so we take it slow, just happy to finally be out of that fucked up situation. I look out the back window to make sure they're gone and they are booking it like demons. We're going at least 35 miles an hour making hairpin turns with these things keeping in tow with our car on foot. They come within 5 feet of our back fender. I remember being able to make out eyes on the dark one. They were crazed and wide. It was so terrifying that I have chills retelling it to this day. Finally my friend guns it and we're flying down this rural icy road going 50 miles an hour in a blind panic. After we're sure we get away we start to slow down. No one says a word for about 10 minutes when my friend driving finally breaks the horrible silence.
There's something chasing us.
I look back and there's this intense light chasing us. It didn't look like headlights. For one thing, there was only one, and it was about 5 feet off of the ground. Whatever it was gaining on us. We managed to push it to 60 somehow without dying. This thing was keeping up with us no matter how fast we were going. Eventually we get close to the end of the road, and we realize that it's gone. We don't care. Not anymore. We're flying down the highway for a good 45 minutes when we finally get pulled over. I was never so happy to see a fucking cop. He lets us go, tells us to slow down, and sends us on his way. We spent that night in my friend's basement, with the lights on, just sitting on the floor waiting for the sun. We're grown-ass men pissing ourselves hiding from ghosts or whatever the fuck it is that wanted us. There is no doubt in my mind about that fact. They wanted to catch us. I'm never going back there, X. Nothing anybody can say or do will ever make me go back there. Be careful if you ever find yourself driving down Clinton Road, because you never know what's waiting for you to get out of your car.
I live by Clinton Road. You take Route 23 through Kennelin. The highway turns to 2 lanes, and goes through West Milford to Newfoundland. The turn for Clinton is literally on the highway, maybe 200 feet from 2 shopping centers and the massive always brightly lit Grasshopper Irish pub within plain view of the road entrance. I pass by it every time I go to Cherry Ridge Range in Vernon, like 10 minutes farther down the road. They literally just closed Clinton for roadwork and were only letting local traffic through not 2 weeks ago for pothole repair because it fucking sucks. My brother's girlfriend lived there like 4 years ago. Story is bullshit. Clinton is full of woods and trap houses playing music at 3 in the goddamn morning or selling shitty weed to people coming from Grasshopper. The story isn't the Klan or demons or shit. It was that the trees have human faces on them after bodies got dumped there and now they haunt the road. Which if you go there you'll see it's bullshit and that it's just someone carved smiley faces and shit into a few of them once you're out of view of the highway, and the nuggets at the dead end side have Halloween masks on some. Clinton Road in West Milford is famous for Dead Man's Curve, which is a road limit 50 that has a sharp turn around the reservoir that drunkards have gone off before. There's nothing haunted about it, just meth. Another one is Ewing Avenue in Franklin Lakes off 208. A school bus full of kids got into an accident and died on this completely straight, well-populated suburban road one day, and now if you put your car in neutral and put baby powder on the back windshield you'll have handprints on it that push your car out of an intersection to save you. Except it's on a downward slope and the baby powder thing is bullshit. Source: I've lived in Haskell nearly my whole life. If you want scary shit, go to Paterson and just exist. Within minutes you'll feel a strange force overwhelming you and you'll wake up somewhere else without your wallet.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.